You're gonna have to still have the music in the background for the whole meeting, or?
Yeah. That goes down when we start.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Select Board. We would start the meeting as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We start off this evening's festivities with our annual property tax clarification hearing. Before the tax rate can be set, the Select Board must hold a public hearing each year to consider the tax rate options available for the town. The hearing is held after the assessors have determined final values and reported this information to the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. The purpose of this hearing is to determine the percentage share of the tax levy that each class of property will pay. The CFO and assessor are here tonight to provide data relevant to this process so that we can adopt parameters for the fiscal year 21 tax bills. Having said that, I move to open the public hearing. Is there a second? Very good. Welcome again, as always. The floor is yours.
So I will jump in, except the host has disabled screen sharing. Our dry run went so well.
Anyone who's watching this at home, we have 3 members of the Select Board in attendance and 2 who have zoomed in.
All right, can everybody, there you go. Everybody see them? And Dan and Don, I presume you're going to follow along from home, and you did receive the packet of information electronically today. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, and good evening. Tonight we are here to have our annual tax classification hearing. This will set the tax parameters for the FY21 tax bills, which are scheduled to go out on January 1st. Tonight, what we are doing is, most members of the board, if not all, have been through a tax classification hearing process. So I'm actually going to dispense with some of the finer details that we typically go through, and we'll focus specifically on talking about what's happening with our values here in town. And then we will take a look at the impact of a split rate here on our tax levy. Town of Bellingham has had a split tax rate since the early 2000s, and we will continue to advocate for a split tax rate. We will then talk about the different factors for you to consider, and I will give you my recommendation on the factor that I believe the town should adopt for this FY21 tax bill. We will then take the 5 votes needed in order for us to submit our paperwork to the Department of Revenue, which is the factor, the small business exemption, the water exclusion, the residential exemption, and then we will continue the hearing for the second part of our classification process. So when we talk about split tax rates, having just completed our town meeting, we know what our annual spending is going to be for the FY21 budget process. And we also know an estimate of what our other funding sources are for the budget. That includes state aid, local receipts, enterprise funds, and some of the other available funds that we voted at town meeting, including free cash and Title V septic betterments. So what is left over is the tax levy that is used to fund our annual operating budget. And if we look at the composition of our property classes here in the town of Bellingham, we essentially have a 70-30 split. When we look strictly at value, 70% is residential, 30% is commercial. And if we had a single tax rate, that is how the tax levy would be applied. 70% would be borne by the residential taxpayers and 30% would be borne by the commercial, industrial, personal property. However, here in the town of Bellingham, because we do have a split tax rate, tonight we're talking about how much of that tax levy we want to shift away from the residential taxpayers and over to the commercial, industrial, personal property base. And in the lower right-hand corner of this particular slide, what I'm showing you is if we were to have a single tax rate, essentially our $46 million tax levy would be comprised of $32 million paid by the residential taxpayers and 14.3 million paid by the commercial properties. If we were to adopt a factor, and in this particular case, I'm using the factor that we had adopted last year, you can see that the tax levy borne by the residential class goes down from 32 million to 29 million. And the tax levy for the commercial industrial class goes from 14 million up to 17.2 million. So that's the impact of shifting the tax levy. So when we take a look at, in this particular chart, we're taking a look at the impact on an average single family home. And in the upper right-hand corner, you can see historically where our values have gone in terms of an average single family home. Betsy's going to talk a little bit about what's happening with the values in our community, but as you can see, the value of an average single family home here in the town of Bellingham continues to appreciate. Last year's average single family home was valued at $324,000. It is now up to $338,000 for this particular fiscal year. And that's a great thing for people who are looking at the equity in their homes and the value of their property here in the town of Bellingham. Last year's average single family tax bill was $4,600, $4,612 to be exact. And based on what I am going to present to you this evening, along with my recommendation for a factor, we are anticipating that an average single family tax bill will increase to $4,800, or an increase of about $250 on an average single family tax bill. The chart down below shows you the relationship between an average single family home value and its share of taxes. And you'll see that many years ago, there was a larger disparity between the value and the taxes that were being paid, and we're closing that gap. Tonight, we're going to talk about, and I am going to recommend to this board that we adopt a residential factor of 0.89, which is the factor that we have had in place for a number of years. My recommendation is based on the fact that we have recently had an override. We have gone to the taxpayers here in the town of Bellingham and asked them to support an increase in our operating budget in the form of an override to the tax levy. And we've also had a recent change with our stormwater operations, converting that out of the operating budget into an enterprise fund. So given those two significant changes in our tax levy, I recommend that we maintain consistency in our factor of 0.89 in order to mitigate any additional impacts to our residential tax base and conversely to our businesses. We're at a very precarious time in the economy right now, and that we want to make sure that we are also paying very close attention to our local businesses and the impacts or burdens that we are placing on them. And so for those reasons, my recommendation is to stay at a 0.89. In this particular chart here, where we're looking at some examples, what you'll see is that there are two commercial examples shown at the top. And then there are, I only see two on my screen, but there are three residential examples shown below. When you talk about adopting the factor, we can either have a single tax rate where the factor would be equated to a 1.0. So you'll see the first column is a single tax rate. And as you go further to the right, what you're doing is you're widening that gap and shifting the burden away from residential taxpayers and over to commercial. So I've given you a couple of examples here of a 0.91, a 0.89, and a 0.87. And you can see if we look at just this commercial property alone, right now, for FY21 at a 0.89, the tax burden for the Whole Foods development over there would be $715,000. If we were to shift more of a burden and go to a 0.87, more of a burden over to the business properties, their tax bill would go from $715,000 up to $746,000. Conversely, if we closed the gap and looked at the 0.91, their tax burden would go from $715,000 down to $685,000. Whenever there's a movement one way or another, that burden has to go somewhere else, and that burden then shifts to the residential taxpayers. Any questions on how the shift works or these particular examples that have been given to you? No. All right, so let's just get a quick rundown from our assessor about what's happening with our values, because we know, as we talked about at special town meeting and preparing, we had some significant strength in our new growth for FY21 that we're really pleased by, and we'd like to talk a little bit about that and just the forecast for FY22, which may not be as strong as we've seen in the past couple of years.
Well, I'm very pleased with the tremendous growth that we had this past year. We've had some just really wonderful additions in our industrial base. We've got the 160 Mechanic Street warehouse that hit the tax rolls this year at 60% completion. The two warehouses, 351 and 353 Maple Street, we grabbed those at 100% this year. There's also 302 Hartford Avenue, 4 mini warehouse buildings that were completed. And last but not least, we also grabbed, I think, another 25% on the cannabis warehouse at 26 William Way, which is still not complete. So that is one of the major reasons that we had really wonderful growth in that sector. With the residential sector, all the stuff that I talked about last year, Connor Crossing, the new homes on Grove Street, the 2 major Pine Hollows, Hartford Village too, all of these hit the tax rolls this year at 100%. Macy Estates, all of these hit the tax rolls at 100%. So that would, really justify why we have such wonderful growth in that sector. And finally, in the commercial sector, we've seen gas stations galore, which hit the tax rolls this year. And last but not least, personal property, which this year we had really significant growth in that sector. I'd like to say mainly because we use the services of RRC. This was a recertification year, so we spent about 2 weeks getting all the businesses that we, either new businesses or businesses that either underreported or failed to report. So it really was a great exercise in hiring RRC to do our personal property. We also used them this year because it was a different reporting requirement for the 504s, which are energy producing, like Mass Electric, Eversource, and the DOR is requiring this for all communities next year. This year, because we were a recertification year, we had to have appraisals on these 4 sectors. And these appraisals, really one of the reasons the values are what they are is because the new values as a result of the blended method of value really accelerated the value in those sectors. It's not growth, but it adds to the tax base. These numbers are much higher than previously assessed. This is what the DOR wants us to do. Recertification year means that every 5 years the state comes in, they spend an awful lot of time going through all of our records, all of our tables, looking at all of our sales. And I'm happy to report that we didn't have any blips on the radar. Our field work, they didn't have any major comments about our field work, which means we're doing our job. And I'd like to just shout out to Tim McCarty and Inspectional Services. The new permit software and the communication we have with that office, especially with COVID and not being able to do the inspections, has been absolutely stellar. And I really enjoy working with that department. As far as what's going to happen, I just want to just briefly touch on the fact that we've had tremendous sales in the warehouse sector. Unlike my colleagues that are in the R&D segment up on 495 North, we don't have R&D office space. We're the warehouse capital of Metro West, and I'm happy to report that the sales will justify the numbers that we have. Just last month, the 2 warehouses that we just grabbed this year in completion, the Campanelli warehouses, they just sold for $76,100,000, which is about $180 a square foot, which is one of the highest sale prices for Class A warehouse space in this area. In the last 5 years, we've seen sales of 25.5 all the way to 31.8 on the existing warehouses that we have. I'm confident that we can defend these numbers, at least in the industrial segment. We don't have a lot of ATV cases. In fact, we were able to settle a couple of them based on these sales. So I feel very, very happy with those numbers. Now, next year, I don't think I'll be sitting here talking about the numbers that I'm seeing today. I did a quick look on the permit revenue. And by the way, we tax construction through June 30th. So as of right now, there's about 300 reviews, and I went through all of them before I came in here tonight. And there's about 25 new homes on the radar. I have no idea what the status is. And there's another 25 additions that are in queue, work in progress. The rest of the permits right now are decks, sheds, finished basements, not much to go on. I can't estimate what we're going to have next year, but we will be seeing hopefully the cannabis warehouse completed, and 160 Mechanic Street we know will be completed. And last but not least, there's a minor, I mean not millions, addition going on at the Delphinate Concrete Company up on Harvard Avenue. So growth for next year, modest, modest at best. And last but not least, the changes in the property classes. We're seeing about a 5% increase in the residential sector, 101s, single family homes. Condominiums, a 6.4% increase. Commercial, 7.5%. Industrial, 15.3%. We have to review these numbers every year. The sales activity in Bellingham is strong. The days on market for most homes are less than a week. There's just not enough inventory for people. And Cheryl and I look at these sales every month. We review them. We make sure there's no mitigating factors which drive these numbers to what they are. Bellingham's a desirable community, mainly because of our low tax rate. I think in our nice balance of commercial, industrial, residential. So,
And the quality of the services that we provide.
that's right. You know, we've done well with COVID. I think everybody's been extremely cooperative. Most of the residents that we deal with have been, you know, dealing with us with pictures. We're just going to continue to do the same, and you know, virtual inspections in conjunction with inspectional services. And I'm hoping at least for a good year with data collection, and with personal property, we'll be focusing a little bit more on that this year. So I wish I could predict growth for next year. I won't be saying $1 million because I know it won't be, but I'm just happy to report that what we got this year, I'm very happy with that number. Anybody got any questions?
Awesome, you're great news for
Good.
once.
We're happy with those numbers too.
I know. I couldn't believe it. Like I was bird dogging this, and you know, just really scraping, and but I'm just happy with the certification numbers because it's not fun for an assessor to have to sit through this. They really, it's a little bit of torture actually when they, you know, descend upon your town and start asking you why is this, that, and all this stuff. But I'm happy to report it's my last one in my career, and it went very smoothly. And
It happens every 5 years.
every
not
5 years.
year.
So I can tell you right now, I won't be doing this 5 years from now. But it's, you know, I think we're doing a good job. Our abatement activity has always been low. I am worried, obviously, the effect that COVID has had on some of the commercial sectors. So I'm happy that we're going to do up the overlay. And needless to say, we'll do our best to defend these values because I'm confident that they're stable.
So 2 questions.
Sure.
The 351, 353 sale.
Yeah.
You said that helped to defend values at other properties. Does that increase the value of those other properties for the next tax year?
Every year we have to do a statistical analysis. Every 5 years the state comes in and hangs out, but every year we look at the statistics. So the answer is yes. Every single year we look at these numbers. We have to.
But we won't see that till next.
It'll be fiscal
Right.
20.
But,
you know.
that being the case, if 30% of our taxable base is commercial, and that is probably a dramatic shift, a jump because of those properties, wouldn't it stand to reason that our fiscal year 22 residential tax base may not have the blip up? Because obviously what drove the shift years ago was that residential growth was outpacing commercial growth.
Right.
And now we're seeing the inverse with the commercial properties. That should actually help our residential tax base.
It depends because we'll be looking at the calendar sales for 2020 when we come up with the values for fiscal 22. And right now the values, when we look at some of these sales, we try to understand what is driving, you know, a willing buyer to spend X amount of dollars on a house. We're finding that there are no other factors. It's just inventory and low interest rates. So it's really hard to say what's going to happen with all these sectors. It's different.
To just
Okay.
expand a little bit, when we go to look at that next year and look at the values, potentially, yes. However, we need to make sure during the statistical analysis process that that's not an anomaly.
Outlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we
So-
do throw out the highs and the lows, but there's so many sales of all the sectors. We're very lucky in Bellingham that we have so many sales to review. With the industrial sector, it's not as much. And certainly with the commercial, we're certainly not seeing that many sales at all.
And next year, fiscal 22 being a down year, it would appear that based on what we know about some of the developments, Lobasur, property in the south end of town, potential that Bondview comes in line, we should see a spike in 23 and 24.
I think 23 and 24 will be fantastic. But if the projects in the pipeline come to fruition, I think next year it'll be really hard to predict what's the, the relationship between the values that we're going to see and the tax rate at this time.
And we're not seeing anything that would give us reason to pause on those developments that you're talking about. But I also think that this is a good opportunity to highlight that this process involves every facet of our organization. And it starts with the planning department by bringing in these developments, and the board of selectmen and the town administrator negotiating with these developers to bring projects to town that fit, that makes sense, and that can have a positive impact on our tax base like we're seeing and talking about here
I think we're very fortunate that we have the 30% commercial to help offset, as opposed to some of the other towns that will remain nameless in the area that are struggling for that.
Let's just focus on what we're doing and do it well.
Right.
I think we're also lucky, just to say, my colleagues up north are just absolutely freaking out about all this vacant office R&D space. And I feel very lucky that we have these warehouses because it seems like it's going to be the wave of the future. So
Well, I would say that I think we're also very lucky that we have the team in place that's doing this, because it's, as I've seen for the last decade, it's not an easy task, and to get a great group of people doing this work.
I love these numbers.
Congratulations.
I
Well done.
remember last year I said, I hope next year I'm talking about $1 million, and I was so happy when I saw this number because I remember that.
So you said you wouldn't be here for the 5-year valuation, but you'll be here 4 years from now?
I don't know.
That's a big TBD.
I just know like I'm aging out of this job, and I'm seeing all my colleagues are doing their last class hearing, and it's just kind of funny. But going almost 30 years now, so. But I love it when I'm talking like this. Some years not so much. So, but thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank
you.
You're welcome. All right, so quickly, let's finish up here. One of the other things that we like to talk about or look at anyway is what's happening with our neighbors. So what you have, and I know this is an eye chart here, but you got a copy in your packet. What you're looking at is the 28 communities that make up Norfolk County, and they are sorted in order by their average single-family tax bill. And as we have consistently talked about, Bellingham has one of the lowest burdens in the Norfolk County region. This is from the FY20 or last year's tax rate setting, because not all communities have adopted their FY21 tax rate. But even if you think about the increase that we just discussed a moment ago, going from an average tax bill of $4,600 to about $4,800, you still see that we are under $5,000, whereas virtually every other community in the Norfolk County region is over $5,000. So Bellingham continues to be a very good, attractive option in terms of a tax base here for residential homeowners in this particular community.
Eric, can I interrupt for a question?
Please.
So do we have anything on our website, and I should know the answer, but I don't, that almost has like a realtor's fact sheet that has these bullet points talking about our water and tax rates and how it compares to the region, if someone would be looking to
I
move to
don't
the
think
community?
we have something on our website. I know our regional planning council certainly captures and shares that information, and realtors utilize them, but it's certainly something that we could look
I
at.
just think it stands out as a positive for the community.
For sure.
There's a lot of good information that's put out there, the information that we get every year that's put out by Framingham State that looks at the region.
But I mean, I don't know that we
But we
get that word out. I mean,
Sure.
I'll jump off topic just a little bit. Social media popped because people got their stormwater bills. Yet the document that was put together was very articulate. And if people took the time to understand that, I love the chronology of events that led to almost a year plus of saying, hey, it's coming. The town approved it, not the various boards. And it's almost an in-your-face statement that there might be something similar, that when we send out our property tax bills, that we showcase this before people want to complain that, oh my God, I pay so much in taxes, when they don't. And by the way, I did like that you put my house into the tax analysis there.
You are asked for
The
it.
number wasn't included.
My number wasn't, but I know how much I pay. No, I use sorry.
It's a good idea. Maybe we can get something ready before the January bills hit.
Yeah, we
I mean, this is a feel-good story because of the growth.
Absolutely. There are some limitations on what we can include in stuffers in a real estate bill, but at a minimum, we can do a QR code like we did and link people to that information. And
Yeah, if they want to go searching.
Yep, why not? Okay. All right, so we talked about the recommendation earlier and the reasons why. Let's talk quickly about the small business exemption. I know this is something that is near and dear to this board's heart, is making sure that we are providing as many options as we can for those very small businesses to make sure that we retain them here in our community. The maximum exemption that we can offer is 10%, and we have consistently done that for a number of years. We are going to recommend that we adopt a 10% small business exemption again this year. It is available to businesses that have a total commercial value under $1 million and that they have less than 10 full-time employees, as reported by the Department of Employment and Training. The impact, as you can see from this chart, is that based on those criteria, there are approximately 100 businesses here in the town of Bellingham who would qualify for that small business exemption, and the total dollar impact from their tax bill is about $63,000. In your packet, you will see those list of 100 businesses if you're curious about which ones are eligible. The assessor's office and Cheryl in particular has worked hard to put that together. So we're going to ask you to, in just one moment, adopt the small business exemption. The other item that we also need to talk about in your packet, which is under tab number 8, is the water exclusion. And you will see my recommendation included in my letter requesting that this board adopt a water debt shift of $740,000, which is consistent with what we have done the last several years. And you'll see the history on the next page of the water debt shift, which the town has adopted since 2004. The last item is the town. We have the option of adopting a discount for open space. However, here in the town of Bellingham, that is a new issue since we do not have any parcel classes value under that particular category. So we do not need to adopt a discount for open space. The other tax factor that is available to communities is to adopt a residential exemption. A residential exemption typically applies to those larger cities where they have a lot of owner-occupied properties, and there's an incentive for owners to live in those homes. And if they do, they get a special residential exemption. You'll find a lot of those in the city of Boston, the city of Cambridge, Arlington, and other communities where there is a high degree of rental property and owner-occupied property. So that is not applicable here to the town of Bellingham, and we will not be adopting a residential exemption this year.
Can I stop you for a question?
Yep.
On the small business exemption, why are some of the properties at 0?
I was just thinking that.
I can take that if you like.
Go right ahead.
So sometimes we get a list from the Department of Employment and Training, and we will identify anybody who has fewer than 10 employees. So I will go through the list, and some of them are valued over $1 million. Some of them might be in a mini complex, and only one business is on the list. So therefore, all of the businesses that are on the same parcel would have to apply. So I'm not calculating the taxes unless the application comes in the mail. So I didn't get all of the information from that DET list in order to grant an exemption without an application, if I'm explaining that all right.
Yeah. So it's not a case of when we had like Cranberry Meadows or some of the other plazas that one or more of the properties isn't occupied. They don't qualify?
Yeah, that is because it is supposed to be occupied, so if it's multiple businesses, they have to be under $1 million, first of all. And then if, say there's 3 businesses, I'm thinking about, the business next to Charlie's Tire, there's a.
That's Cranberry Meadow.
Is that Cranberry Meadow? Exactly. For a while there, they weren't fully occupied, but now they are. And all 3 of those businesses would have to be on that list in order for me to grant the exemption without the owner applying and providing the information for all 3 of the businesses. But I believe, if memory serves, all 3 of those businesses were on there, so we get to grant that one. But that's why some of them will have $0 because we don't have enough information to automatically grant the exemption without an application being received by our office.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no worries, no worries.
Thank
All
you.
right, so as last 2 pieces, as Betsy had indicated, we are taking a very strong focus on using our overlay, which is used for abatements and exemptions. It also covers the cost of our senior work-off program. And so you'll see a chart in there regarding the overlay as well as our excess levy capacity, which is anticipated. And again, these are all estimates because the calculations will be redone by the Department of Revenue. But the estimated excess levy capacity based on the final changes to the overlay will be about $60,000 to $65,000 in excess levy capacity. So with that being said, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you to put that to top 1 in your packet, which is where you have the motion. And I'm going to. Yep.
Mr. Chairman? Oh,
Please, yes,
so
ma'am.
I just got a couple questions here. Mary, so the sheet that you presented, the one that has the tax shift based on fiscal 21 and fiscal 20, the comparatives. So just looking at and Betsy, you can jump in here, and because you know me, I try to oversimplify things because I'm not that bright. So the average single family in 2020 was assessed at 324 and change, and 21 it's assessed at 338, right? So we're looking at about a 4.5% increase in the assessment of the average single family home. Am I right there?
Yes.
Okay. So then you look at the tax bill, which is the average tax bill was 4612 and 2020, and now it increases to 4863, which is about a 5.5% increase. So if the assessment, which again, the assessment is normally less than what the appraisal is, am I correct to say that as well?
Generally.
Generally speaking, right? Usually it's assessed less than what you can sell your house for, right? For the most part.
Yes.
And nobody's a realtor there, so I'm not going to hold anyone's feet to the fire. But so that sheet, Mary, as well includes the 2.5 override as far as the estimated. It does. All right. So we're looking at average home properties going up about 4.5%. Average tax bills going up 5.5% over the course from 1 year to 2. So that also includes the 2.5 that we can do, the 2.5 increase for the levy, plus the town voted on override. So at the end of the day, the assessments went up 4.5%, but taxes are only going up 5.5%. Am I oversimplifying that, or is that an accurate statement?
So there's no real.
For residential,
Right.
I should say.
So Dan, there's no real correlation between the assessment and what the taxes are going up.
Yep.
There's not a hard and fast rule that there's a relationship there.
No, I get that, but I guess my point is people tend to say taxes went up 5.5%, and we're not allowed to go up more than 2.5%. Yet your assessment went up 4.5%. So really, your tax is only going up 1% this year based on this shift, because a lot of the burden based on the shift is actually going to go towards the CIP. and kind of relieve residential.
It will, and actually, let's quantify that for 1 second, because at the very back of your packet, there is a giant sheet that's a fold-out sheet. And I skipped that because it's folded enough. But this is one that we take a look at every year. And if you look at the top section where I'm giving you the FY21 impact,
Yep.
what you'll see at the bottom of the FY21 grid, you'll see that I have circled my recommendation of the 4863 under the 0.89 factor. Look in the gray shaded area. The benefit of the tax shift is about $491 or $5
91.
to an average residential single family home.
All right, and that's I guess I seen that. Not everyone had seen that, but I just wanted to point that out because again, sometimes people just look at my taxes went up X percent, therefore taxes were raised by this much. But in actuality, it's not as clean as that because value went up, or assessment went up, and the split adjusted accordingly. So that's all I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I think that to Dan's point, though, I mean, I think when we do the talking points, the layperson looking at this is going to draw that conclusion that there's an error when property value goes up 4 and taxes go up 5 and change percent.
Mhm.
If we address that and I guess explain it away, that it's not simply a mathematical formula that's based on valuations and everything else.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
something that's better for a document that says, and oh, by the way, you are paying one of the lowest tax rates in the region.
Right. And without getting too far into detail, and I think we can work on some marketing materials to that extent, Michael. I just want to remind, and for anybody who is listening at home or following along in any way, when we talk about Prop 2.5, I want to remind people that Prop 2.5 is not limited to a single tax bill. So the law doesn't say that my tax bill cannot go up by more than 2.5%. What the law says is that the overall tax levy, the accumulation of all of the tax bills in town cannot exceed a 2.5% increase. There may be shifts within that, where some bills are actually going down and others are going to go up more than 2.5%.
We had that example 6-7 years ago with Caryville Crossing, went up 10 to 12%, and some tax bills went down, and people were banging on the doors.
Sure. But we have to remember, it's not a restriction on your single tax bill. It's a restriction for the overall tax levy. Okay?
It's a common question every year.
Absolutely.
We get the phone calls and we explain it away.
Mhm.
All right, but we can work on those materials and hopefully facilitate that conversation a lot easier. All right, so can I ask you guys to go through those motions for me so we can finalize our conversation? Unless, Don, do you have any other questions?
No, I've been following along just fine. The handouts are here. I'm good.
Excellent, great.
There's also members in the public. I don't know-
Oh, it is a public. You know what, it's hard to see, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
I don't know if anyone has comments, but if there are any comments from the general public, you can unmute or raise your hand or put something in the chat.
Okay, we'll give them 30 seconds if they want to write in or sign voice their questions. Very easy to follow along, thank you.
Excellent, good.
Helped we've seen it a few times.
You guys have seen it yet, and thank you for bearing with me. I'm required to go through all of this.
All good. All right, having not received any questions from the general public, we'll move on to the motions. Kelly, would you like
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
we can't close the public hearing.
Oh, we can't because we got to extend it. Never mind. Kelly, you do what you got to do. Kelly, you be you.
And number 1 of your packet has the motions we're going to go through.
I move to accept a residential factor of 0.89 for FY21 tax classification purposes.
Okay.
We have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. 5-0 vote.
I move to accept a fiscal year 21 small business exemption of 10%.
Second.
First and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
I move to not accept a residential exemption for FY21.
Second, sorry.
First and seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, none, 5-0 vote.
This is Cindy and Kelly.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move to
Okay.
accept an exclusion for fiscal year 21 of $740,000 for water debt repayments.
Second.
First and seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, none, 5-0 vote.
I move to continue the public hearing until December 7th, 2020.
Second,
First and seconded, any further discussion? Dan and Don, we will not have a meeting next Monday. I don't know if you heard that early on.
no, it didn't.
The Department of
Okay.
Revenue needs more than Thanksgiving. Mary didn't know we were having a holiday this year.
Oh, okay. Well, isn't Thanksgiving canceled due to COVID?
Pretty much. Mary's gonna work.
I'll bring turkey sandwiches over, Mary, because that's all I'm having.
All those in favor say aye.
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 None. You are ahead of schedule because our next part of our meeting is at 7:45.
All right.
Great job.
Great job.
Thank you.
Hey, Mary and all, thank you very much. I really appreciate the work. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
You guys don't want to hang out? Come on, you gotta start this stuff now.
All right, the 7:45 part of the business is not a public hearing, so we do not need to get into detail, but we do need to approve the MCWT bonds.
Yes.
Would you like to cover that, Mary?
That would be me again. So tonight I'm going to ask the board to execute the loan document. MPWT is the Mass Clean Water Trust. That is the agency through which we borrow money for our Title V or Septic Betterment Loan Program. So taxpayers have the ability to apply to the town of Bellingham for a low interest loan in order to upgrade or replace their septic system. We have a lot of people who are taking advantage of this particular program. In doing so, we borrow the money from the Clean Water Trust. We add that as a betterment to the taxpayer's real estate tax bill, and we record a lien at the Registry of Deeds to protect our interest. Tonight, what I have for you is loan documents in the amount of $600,000 to be permanently financed. The first 300 was an interim loan that was already authorized by the town. It is now being permanently financed. Through a town meeting vote that happened many years ago. We are adding an additional 300 from another town meeting vote that was on the books to be made available for this particular program. The Board of Health has a number of people who are queued up who have applied for this program and are waiting for these funds. So I have two documents here that I'm going to need the Board of Selectmen to sign and execute. Prior to doing that, I do need to ask you guys to formally read the motion. In your packet, I gave you a separate folder, and I'm just going to draw your attention. The green sheet is the motion, but that motion is to reflect the language behind it. So if you can flip to the second page of that, there is a formal, and you guys have done this numerous times, and that language has not changed from previous adoptions of these loan agreements. Those are all of the steps that are laid out that are saying that we are executing $600,000 worth of loan notes, and that the treasurer is authorized to issue those, and all of the other and that we will repay the debt, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said,
Before we get into that,
yeah, sure.
you said that we have a number of applications available. Does demand outstrip availability of funds?
Not at this time. We've been working very closely with the Board of Health and in order to manage that demand for this particular program. And they are satisfied with the level of funding that we have available. I do have one more authorization already on the books that town meeting has authorized in a prior year that was never executed. So if they utilize this additional 300,000 that we're signing off on tonight, I have one more before we have to go back to town meeting in order to provide additional funding for that program.
Mr. Chairman, quick question.
Yes, sir.
This is for the Title V improvements, correct?
Correct.
And it's only Title V. It's not for sewage connections. It's for septic repairs and all that good stuff, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And an average repair is about $25,000 to $30,000. So we essentially can do about 10 projects with each one of these borrowings that we do. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Who wants to do the honors?
Chairman, I move to authorize the execution of the loan documents related to the permanent financing of the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust Loan number CWT-19-13. All is outlined in the attached document entitled Vote of the Board of Selectmen.
So moved.
First and seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
None. 5-0 vote.
Fantastic. I'm gonna leave the documents here with Dennis, so before the three of you, I just need the majority of the board before the three of you leave. If you would mind signing the documents.
You don't want to stay for the rest of the meeting?
You know me, I'm gonna stay, but I'm not gonna stay in the hot seat. Thank
Very
you.
good.
So, Mary, I didn't hear, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Do those documents need to be signed by all members or just majority?
Majority.
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear because I'm not going to be able to come in tomorrow.
Okay, next up, we have been advised by our CFO that whenever donations or grants are received by the town, that is formally the responsibility procedurally to have the Board of Selectmen, excuse me, Select Board. We are actually both right now until the town meeting votes to do the difference, so I'm okay then. To accept these. So we'll take those motions now. First, I need a vote to accept the 10,000 donation from Amazon.
So moved.
Second.
All right, first and second, we'll give Don credit for that one so we can be on the books.
Come on.
Kelly?
Quick comment,
that
Mr.
was-
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Just looking at the request and the purchase order, it says supplier is the Bellingham Fire Department. Is this a gift going towards the fire department, or is that just?
Dennis?
It is something during the permitting process that Amazon had agreed to provide a gift of funds for the purchase of the equipment that's referenced there. So yeah, it's going to the fire department.
Okay, just wanted to ensure. Thank you.
Dan and Don, and for you here, I had asked the question of Mary and Dennis as to the number of grants that the school department receives. And procedurally, it's going to be recommended that the school committee do this similar process of formally voting to accept the grants. That makes it a matter of public record as opposed to just taking them in. So I guess that's something that will be followed up separately as we go.
Okay.
Next order of business, a vote to accept $5,080 in election.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I don't think we voted.
Sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? 5-0 vote. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. I do appreciate that. Hey, Robert's Rules of Orders, there is a procedure to this. Next up is a vote to accept $5,080 from Elections COVID Response Grant from the Center for Technology and Civic Life. And I believe this was brought to us by Mr. Sposato, our town clerk.
A nice job pursuing that, those
Yep.
funds.
Kudos to him.
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
I do have a question. Now,
Yep.
where will those funds go? Will it just be to offset the expenses that we have for elections?
Correct.
How is it prioritized? Is it going to be, I'm just curious how it'll be prioritized as far as the spending of that money. Does it go toward the labor? Does it go toward the folks that help out? I'm just curious. How it's,
Poll workers are between poll workers and police details, quite a few expenses.
okay, great. Okay. Just for the public, just so they know how the money's being spent.
Did we take the vote, Mr. Spencer?
Not yet, sir.
Not yet.
Go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
None? 5-0 vote.
Chairman,
Just
I vote
if I could just ask a question. How many grants and donations of this should we expect in a given year if you looked at anything historically, if this is the process going forward?
So it can fluctuate year over year depending on when donations come in. But I actually don't have a hard number off the top of my head.
Okay. And does that include mitigation that's received as part of development, or is that a separate?
I don't think that would be a.
That's a very specific purpose.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next up.
Chairman, I vote that I move that we vote to approve the October payments, which there. Sorry. Have the abatements.
I do.
I'm just following sequential order, my bad.
Oh.
It's all you,
All
Buttercup.
right, Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the following abatements. Capital improvement in the amount of $142.50. Sewer in the amount of $1,026.10. Stormwater in the amount of $64.79. Trash in the amount of $542. Water in the amount of $794.49 for a grand total of $2,569.88.
First and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 None. 5-0 vote. Would you like to do the next one, Liz?
I thought it was the next one, sorry. Mr. Chairman, please that we vote on approving the November 2nd minutes.
Dan, you want to get on the rep books here?
Second.
There you go. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None. 5-0 vote. Town Administrator's report, Mr. Frame.
All right, great job this morning by Mrs. McNulty and Mr. Grant on our Access Bellingham program.
I must interrupt. You never said when I did it that I would do it.
And you are correct.
So Michael, are you calling something?
But I know that we're getting more and more viewers based on the number of questions that are coming in. So I think it's serving the purpose that we wanted it to. So we'll continue with those. And of course, our numbers are going up. Esther does a great job providing an update, and Detective Kirby was on there this morning, and she did excellent talking a little bit about the fraud that's going on in town, the employment fraud and the phone scams are just picking up. It's just, as she was saying, it's just incredible how sophisticated these things are getting and how believable they are. So excellent job by them this morning. We continue to have our department head Zoom meetings every Tuesday. The numbers are going up. We're going to be scaling back. I was talking with Josie this morning, and we are going to be scaling back services at the senior center. We do
That's so
have
heartbreaking.
it is difficult. The outreach will continue and be expanded, but unfortunately, with numbers increasing, we know that's our most vulnerable population, and Josie's been trying hard to expand rather than cut back. But we'll see how it goes after the holidays. Everyone's expecting some difficulties potentially after the holidays. Families get together. Hopefully that won't be the case, but we'll be prepared for it nevertheless. No plans to do anything different here at the Town Hall Municipal Center. We are encouraging people to do as much as they can online, pay their bills online, fill out their applications online, etc. So obviously in the spring, the governor essentially gave us the guidance to close down and to the public, and we were here, but we were working, a lot of us were working remotely and doing work by appointments, but there is no plans as of this moment to shut down these offices, and obviously there'll be discussions like that too, and certainly we'll pay attention to what the guidance is at the state level. One of the things that we're going to be looking at, Jim's been just looking for his next 3-year planning process to begin now that the master plan is winding down. He's going to be presenting the end of December the final outcome of not the final outcome, but really the master plan and the recommendations that have been adopted. And it's been a lot of work. You've been at that for at least a couple of years. Anyway.
2 years now.
Yeah, great
What else
job.
have you been working on?
Yeah, well,
Everything.
we've got, every 10 years we have to do our charter review, and every 5 years we have to do our bylaw review. And what we thought was combining the two together. The charter review does require a 9-member committee, and it spells out who participates. School committee participates, people on various planning boards, selectmen participate, as well as citizens at large. So we will start the process of soliciting interested participants and bring them forward to the board. 2 members of the board of selectmen, so something for you to think about. And I think this will probably be one of those year or two ventures, but we only look at the charter every 10 years, and it is an act of legislation and something that has to be taken very seriously. And of course, our bylaws are ever in need of.
So we get to formally switch from Board of Selectmen to Select Board?
Select Board. That's when the official legislation would be presented. So that'll be coming up. And as I say, think about who would like to participate. 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, and we will be reaching out to the other boards that the charter says requires participate, and then bring all those recommendations back to you. So that's what we'll be working on. We're starting up the budget process. I know Mary's going to be sending out the budgets or allowing people to get into the portal and start loading their budget information. We'll have our budget hearing the end of February, as we always do. But in the meantime, what we'll be doing is meeting with departments and getting together a budget that makes sense. The state still has yet to pass their FY21 budget, and once that's done, actually it has been done. The Senate's finished it, so we're still waiting. Yeah, so now it's House Ways and Means. No telling when the FY22 is going to be passed, but hopefully we'll have FY21 passed by the time we meet. But they have been holding up to the things that they committed to. They talked in terms of keeping the local aid level funded, and it's fluctuated in our case a little bit here and there, but it's very close to what was committed way back in almost a year ago.
Mr. Chairman,
That's where we're at
quick-
here.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yes, Dan?
Yeah, quick question for Dennis and/or Mary. So the Senate put forth a budget to complete 2021. Is that from January to July, or did they just go through December?
That'd be a fiscal year budget, so that would be their fiscal year 21 budget for the
Well, okay, all right.
30th. They've been operating on a 112, but that's their now House Ways and Means, and they'll have their joint committee, and then they'll bring it to the government.
All right, so, all right, because the last I heard, they were just going through the end of the fiscal year, but if it's through,
No, it is the fiscal year, June 30th.
I think what you talked about is that the state is operating on a 112 budget.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so it would make.
All right.
But I think
okay,
the legislature typically does their revenue consensus hearing the first week of December, which is to set the revenue projections and expectations for the following fiscal year, FY22. And it would be interesting to see if they actually hold that hearing and what they're going to project,
Right.
given that they haven't finished FY21.
Right. Kind of hard to get into that at this
Yeah.
point. And it is, it has been a crazy year. And how do you project things like income tax and revenue, as well as the gambling? They're talking about shutting the casinos down again, and there's a lot up in the air.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, Dennis, you mentioned, our big budget meeting in February. Are you guys already thinking about how we're going to go about doing that? Because obviously we cannot have it like we usually do in here with 50 people.
No, what we would have to do is invite groups and stick to times.
Okay.
And I don't expect that by the end of February, we're going to be that much further along than we are right now. So we'd have to stick to times and ask people to not come into the building until we go out and get them in the snow-covered parking lot at the end of February.
So are we thinking it might take longer than
Maybe
in the
it'll take,
past,
it
or
might take 2
shorter?
hearings, but in the past, I think we've met with police, fire, DPW, library, and obviously if the board has questions on a number of budgets, it could conceivably take 2 sessions if there were a lot of budgets that you wanted to review.
Yeah.
Nope, I have nothing else.
I have, I guess, 2 points. One is relative to the budget. Is there anything we would do different now, knowing that we're going to have those challenges in February and March, for us to start looking at the budget, like which departments are the hot points? Obviously, we know what we're spending on capital on those items, but which ones may need to be thinner than other budgets that need to be level funded?
I think those are all the types of things that we'll be looking looking at as we go through the process.
But I mean, as the Board of Selectmen, is there anything that we would identify in advance, say in that January timeframe? And I use that as a segue, because usually we do our appointments to various boards in March. And COVID caught us by surprise, and we left a number of one or more positions, I don't know the exact number, unfilled, because we couldn't bring in candidates. And that leads me to think that we have positions that are up for renewal and ones that were hung over from March of 2020, whether we could get a list in the next month of all the positions that are open for March, and so that they don't go unfilled.
What types of positions are you talking about that we appoint that are unfilled, other than?
Well, not unfilled, I mean, but I know that, like, what was it? I think that was like on the Board of Health, we had a position that
Oh,
we
you're talking
didn't
about
appoint.
boards.
Yeah,
Yeah,
boards,
okay.
that we just said, all right, whoever's in that position is going to continue until we have another vote.
Mhm.
Well, presumably, someone else on that board is coming up in March, because usually most positions are 3-year positions for 3-year boards,
Sure.
and we're rolling them off. But I think that we probably need to do some due diligence to make sure that every position has candidates for those positions and not simply empty space. I know that we don't appoint members to FinCom, but, you know, Adam Thorell was an add to that, I think, because you exited.
I exited, and someone else moved. So they still actually have an additional
Yeah.
spot, but it's not advertised, but the moderator
Right.
appoints that.
But when I think of how our budget process is going to go, and that's going to be a greater time commitment. I don't know if Don or Dan, you would agree that we need this information in advance so that we can be very expeditious come March.
As far as all of the appointments.
All
for
of the
different
appointments,
boards and
knowing who
committees.
they are,
Mhm.
and then,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, obviously, if we have empty positions,
Yeah.
we can go out and solicit people that we know that may be good candidates. for.
Maybe before our second meeting in December, we could have that whole list of appointments that are coming up in March. I'm sure it's something that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it would be beneficial too if we reached out to the incumbents to inquire if they wish to return, because, you know, I think people filled out their term, but in a COVID environment, they may not want to anymore because they're hesitant to meet as a group. I mean, not that they don't want to keep doing the work, but it's, you know, I think of some of our senior citizen councils that they can't meet. So I think that's just prudence.
Yeah, we can definitely have that.
I agree.
Certainly by your second meeting in.
Yeah,
December, we
I
can
mean,
have that.
We may not act on it, but at least we have a
Yeah,
document
yeah,
that we're
yeah.
working on to know whether people want to come back or not.
Absolutely.
All right, Dan and Dawn, were you done? That's it. Dan or Dawn, do you have any old or new business?
I
No,
have nothing.
nothing.
Okay. Kelly, Cindy? No? Having satisfied our agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn after saying happy Thanksgiving to everyone who was watching.
Second?
First and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Be safe.
Wash your hands.